when we're experiencing states like depression or anxiety, those are symptoms, and they're not the final verdict. They are the beginning of the inquiry, because these are just symptoms. These are the body communicating something. So when we see that someone has this communication, it's our job to roll up our sleeves and do some reconnaissance and say, well, what is it communicating? That's the real work, is to figure out, how do we get this person back to a state of balance where they're intact, where they're getting their needs met, and then they can feel good. And they don't have to feel like this was their identity that lasts their whole lifetimes.
Wow. Where do we even begin? I do want to start by saying thank you to your mother-in-law, Nana, or your brother, your brother-in-law as well, Manish. Manish, we love you, for kind of having this magical moment for us. But today it's about you. And I mean, you are the brilliant, compassionate Ellen Vora. But who are you today that is perhaps maybe different, the same than the author, the beloved author that we know of?
Wow. That's an interesting reflection. I think that we are all ever evolving, right? And I think anytime you write a book, there's such a delay, there's such a process in the publishing world. So you write a book and then you birth it into the world years after those were the ideas that were most alive in you. There are definitely things that I would do differently if I could make little edits at this point. But I think that what's nice is that I also really wrote the book, The Anatomy of Anxiety, in the pandemic, really in a heavy time. And that was helpful in certain ways to like really be with all of the pressures and the contractions that are put on us. And to me, the message is simple, and I stand by it forever, which is that mental health is physical health. It's not that we necessarily have these genetic, chemical imbalance destinies that hold us down in a particular diagnosis. It's that our bodies are communicating states of imbalance. Sometimes it's physical imbalance. Sometimes it's psycho-spiritual imbalance. And what we really want to do is identify what's the imbalance being communicated by this feeling of anxiety. And can we chip away at that? Can we work to bring something back into balance? And that can be anything from your blood sugars swinging, to you're chronically sleep deprived, to you have no community, to you're having an appropriate response to late-stage capitalism or the inherent fragility of being in a human body. And we just want to feel it all and see what we can nudge back into balance. Since writing that book, I've been on this other journey toward really reclaiming the way I'm a witch. And that's what I'm writing right now, is my second book called The Season of the Witch. And that's really, for me, a call to all women to just reclaim these parts of ourselves. And I certainly came of age thinking, okay, I understand the assignment. This is to be rational, to be skeptical. That's what we call intelligence. And so I performed those left hemispheric, very masculine traits. And it served me well. It opened doors.
Sure. And it also, I mean, you went to the Ivy Leagues of the Ivy Leagues. And
it took me on that whole path that we perceive as successful. And it was in my 30s that I realized this was a wild disavowal of so much of what was also part of me. And so there was a homecoming process of realizing I am both of these things. I can be rational and I can be deeply intuitive. And I had just been living a bit out of balance. So it's not to let go of the rational parts of me, but it was to integrate and embrace all of these witchier, more magical parts of me that I came to largely because of loss and grief. And that was really where I had to make a call and say, well, what is my worldview? Do people continue to exist in some form in the spirit world, or is loss absolute? Is the end the end? And so being faced with that and confronted with that level of grief, that's where I chose, but eventually really came to embody the idea that something vastly beyond our comprehension is occurring here.
Yeah.
And that's brought me a lot of comfort, and I want it to bring other people that same comfort as well. Just that openness to the mystery.
And it's so powerful because it's, you know, oftentimes we forget the magic, you know, in the everyday moments, but also in the esoteric. And, you know, I'll be honest, like you sharing that you're writing a book about, you know, the witches and helping women kind of reclaim that, I'm like, yes, yes. And there is that duality, and you have that duality. And so that's why I'm so excited for this conversation. So I was actually struck by the idea in your book that anxiety isn't something that just happens in our minds. And I want to start there because for so long we've been taught to treat anxiety as this brain disorder, or, you know, we're seeing, and I'm sure you're seeing, the rise of our kids getting, you know, anxious as well. How does all of that land with you, and what's your take on, you know, this new era of even that song that's now in my head?
Anxiety. Somebody's watching me. Yeah.
Yes, and like Will Smith, they did a whole, you know, what was it? Shout out to Will Smith, and I think it's Tatiana Ali who did that recap of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air to that song. So it's like playing in my head right now. But yeah, where are we, and what's your take on this with our generation, with our kids?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of different threads I want to pull here. And
Yes,
I think that
of course.
One is just the reframe of how I think about anxiety differently. The whole reason I want us to take a different approach to anxiety is that the system we have keeps us quite stuck and doesn't offer very much hope. It originally intended to. It's the disease model of mental health. That's what we've come of age with, that says if you have depression or you have anxiety, that's a genetic chemical imbalance. We said it's no longer a moral failing. It's not just your relationship with your mother. We said it's your brain chemistry and it's genetic. And so that took some pressure off, and we stopped shaming, and it was intended to destigmatize mental health conditions, and it was intended to bring us on a path toward getting relief, where the path was, now that we know this is a genetic chemical imbalance, let's treat that with a pill that can correct the chemical imbalance, and then you won't be depressed or anxious anymore. It's a lovely story, and once in a while it works. I do think that the medications we have, they do something. They don't do something that we fully understand, and they don't do exactly what we're being told that they do. It's not that you have low serotonin and they correct serotonin. That has really largely been debunked, and through this umbrella study by Mark Horowitz, published I think about a year and a half ago, what we've really now demonstrated in an airtight way is that that serotonin imbalance doesn't exist. So whatever we thought we were correcting, it's not so simple. And when it works for someone, hallelujah. I'm not dogmatically opposed to that. I am in the business of decreasing human suffering. So in our current menu of treatment options, therapy, psychiatric medication, when that works for someone, I count that as a victory. But as a psychiatrist who's been in practice more than 10 years, I'm also aware of the millions of people for whom that's not bringing them relief. And so that's where we need a different strategy. And what I've come to appreciate is that we don't have these Lexapro deficiency disorders. That's not what depression or anxiety, that's not what they are. When we're experiencing states like depression or anxiety, those are symptoms, and they're not the final verdict. They are the beginning of the inquiry, because these are just symptoms. These are the body communicating something. So when we see that someone has this communication, it's our job to roll up our sleeves and do some reconnaissance and say, well, what is it communicating? Is it communicating physical imbalance? Is it communicating an unmet need or some kind of psychospiritual imbalance? And that's the real work, is to figure out, how do we get this person back to a state of balance where they're intact, where they're getting their needs met, and then they can feel good. And they don't have to feel like this was their identity that lasts their whole lifetimes. I'll pause there, and then we'll talk about kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a thread that I want to take this, because I came across, I think it was Dr. Zach Bush, and he just shared, I don't know if you saw this, but, you know, that he was at an ashram and he was helping a woman, and a lot of these people at this ashram were just so disconnected with their physical bodies, but they had these physical symptoms. And he had kind of concluded that that literally they were souls kind of, drifting away off into trying to get spiritual enlightenment, that they've just forgotten to be in their bodies. And he made an interesting kind of correlation that, what if anxiety is just because a lot of the generation now is just escaping. Mm-hmm. And there's no way to really reconcile that. I probably am getting, the exact words butchered, but it was something along those lines. And I thought, wow, I hadn't heard it that way. And I know you are obviously very spiritual and you connect these worlds. So what is your take on that psycho-spiritual essence? Because even in, obviously the bare bones basics of yoga, there is, we have the crown chakra and the imbalances of the crown chakra from Ayurveda. There's going to be something going on with a lot of these like mind disorders, right?
Yeah. I don't claim to know, but I do think that, let's say, there's a lot of different potential worldviews here, but let's say that we are souls having a physical experience. Maybe we are a drop of the vast ocean of source, but in this lifetime, we have incarnated in a physical body. So to me, that feels like a very important piece of the assignment of whatever is happening here. I don't know what we're doing here. This is beyond our comprehension, but it does feel like there's something about the scarcity of having a physical body, the complexities of having a meat suit, that is part of how we're learning lessons about love this lifetime in this earth school. And so the fact that our bodies have needs, the fact that we feel emotion, I think that these are a big part of what we're here to experience and maybe learn through. And so certainly in my practice, I pay a lot of attention to the meat suit. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily the highest spiritual craft, but we need to be mechanics of this physical body because it's the transmitter through which we're getting our signal. And when we are out of balance physically, it impacts our experience. It even impacts our ability to make our contribution. Mm. And I think that when we are blocked from feeling our emotions, this is also at the heart of so many of the ways that we suffer in terms of our mental health. And I don't blame the individual. This is a collective issue that we have an emotion-phobic culture. We have a very disembodied culture. We have a very emotion-phobic culture. So we're set up to fail. And we have to relearn for ourselves, how do we drop into the body? How do we get a little bit out of our heads, a little bit more into our heart center? How do we really connect with this physical experience? And then how do we let ourselves feel our feelings? I like to say we are due for a cultural rebranding around crying. I think that's a really good place to start because, like, when we cry, we try to squeeze it back in. We try to make it very small and brief, and we apologize. We say, like, I'm sorry. We feel like we're the burden. We feel like that's a sign of weakness. We think crying is it's criteria for certain mental health diagnoses. Mm-hmm. And I think we've got that wrong. I think crying was never the weakness or the burden or the problem. Crying is the medicine. And this is the wisdom of our body, giving us a much needed opportunity to have a release. And so I want so many people to explore giving themselves permission to cry more, to cry bigger, to let it be uglier and messier and complete. I feel like in the last 10 years of my life, I've really learned how to cry more effectively. I've like pushed it to 11.
Oh, wow.
And when I grieved the loss of my mom, I thought I knew how to cry. I was a psychiatrist. I was pregnant. Was someone who wasn't shy about crying. I cried big. But then it's really through psychedelic work and more of these kinds of practices where I've realized, I can cry so much bigger. I can delve deeper with my tears. I can like I've learned now that there's a false peak with crying. You get to a point where you can kind of catch your breath and you can collect yourself.
Right. The
and
60 to 90 seconds of this like dry heaving cry, right?
Yeah. Well, I used to take that exit ramp and be like, okay, I'm done crying. And now I realize that is a very brief pause on the way to the summit.
Okay.
And if you can catch the wave, you can really re-enter and go quite deep at that point. And if I get to a state of crying where it's like that, your face is almost frozen in a grimace, and it's almost at the interface between like poignant sadness and almost like an exquisite ecstasy. It's like an experience of like, this is the deepest form of fusing with like what it is to be alive. That's the level of crying I prefer to get to now.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't happen every day.
How long does that typically take?
I don't know, because when you're really in it, it's somewhat of a timeless experience.
Right.
But I think that we're not even coming close these days. I think that's a proper 5 to 10 minute, sometimes longer, big cry.
Well, and I want to talk about even the science behind it, because, what I've read is it's basically, your tears are like you're releasing the cortisol.
That's right.
You're releasing the cortisol, and also, it's what that feeling is when you're kind of the dry heaving at the end of that cry, which also kind of mimics like the breath of fire in many ways of breath work, that we're not necessarily breathing deep in our belly. And can you talk a lot about kind of, what else is going on?
Yeah, you're inadvertently doing pranayama. You're doing breath work, and it overtakes you and forces that. But then also, that's exactly right, is that a component of our stress response, it's called ACTH, which stands for adrenocorticotropic hormone. It comes out in our tears. So it's essentially cutting the stress response off at the root. But what's so fascinating is that it comes out in emotional tears. Like if you're cutting an onion and you're crying profusely, there's no ACTH in those tears. So it just goes to show this is a real mechanism for the body, that when we are emotionally driven to cry, a component of our chain of events in our stress response comes out in the tears. It's basically your body saying, okay, now we generated the stress response and now we're releasing it. It's a feedback cycle that helps bring it to a close. And so we bring ourselves to emotional resolution when we actually move the energy up and out, when we actually move through it rather than bottling it.
So rather than stuffing it and suppressing it and just kind of like holding our fingers when we're like, holding back the tears.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's so fascinating, because that release and the resolve kind of after that cry session is like, oh, okay, I just feel like I've just released a ton of bricks.
It's free therapy, and it's right there for the taking. And when we hold it back in, which our culture tells us to do, we stuff and we keep all of that stress unmetabolized in our bodies. And I think it hardens us.
Yeah.
I think it makes us more friable and fragile, and I think that that's contributing to why we're struggling so much.
And the anxiety that comes with all of that.
Exactly.
So, and now, well, what's really interesting is I love this cry release, and I want to double click on that for a second, because even in the work that I do, I'm like, okay, we're gonna set a timer or schedule your grieving. What do you say to your, that's in the book, or even your clients in your practice? Do you recommend a scheduling time to grieve? Like put on those 90s R&B love songs, End of the Road, that was my jam, loved it, played it on repeat. Any of the Boyz II Men soundtrack, like that would elicit those sad emotions. I've spoken to actors who they do this to really get themselves into, that moment of, if they need to be super somber or sad, to either revisit a painful emotion or a time they got, heartbroken, and then fuel it with these sad songs. Because we also have rage playlists. Right. But then, the sad playlist. So what do you say to all of that?
Yeah. Well, music is so divine, right? And that's always a wonderful portal to enter into whatever, like I sometimes bring people through swamping practices where it's like you can put on the rage playlist or you put on the grief playlist and you and you elicit that emotional state in order to move through it. When I'm working with patients, I more so want to prepare them for the fact that grief, like if you can schedule a swamping session and take yourself into a mood, that's great. Often we call it nonlinear, and it hits us like this tsunami out of nowhere. So what's more useful, though very difficult to reconcile with our busy lives, is that can you make space for the fact that when it comes all of a sudden out of nowhere at quite an inconvenient time, can you drop what you're doing and surrender to it? I remember I struggled with this mightily, that my mom passed away now almost 10 years ago.
Wow.
And I was pregnant, and I had just gotten this big work opportunity with a hero of mine, and I took on a project with him. And the summer, I was trying to work on this project, and tsunamis of grief would overtake me. And I'd find myself sort of juggling and realizing, this is stupid that I'm trying to meet these, like do these deliverables and further my career right now. Like I had to release that, and I had to let grief overtake me, where I would just drop to my knees on the floor and wail in these primal ways. I needed to really move through it. And I'm glad that I figured that a little too late, but not too late. I was able to actually get it and move through that grief. And so I usually just want to prepare people to know, and it is temporary.
Yeah.
This isn't forever. I'm not still doing this 10 years later. I wasn't doing this even 1 year later. But at the beginning, when it's hitting you in that way, if you can design your life around being able to fall to the floor in those moments and feel it fully, it's a good thing. I think we can come back to it later, but it's great if we can feel it fully in the moment.
Yeah.
I talk about this in The Anatomy of Anxiety, but even so much more in the book I'm writing right now, Season of the Witch, where I'm talking about grief almost throughout the book, because that's really been my journey through embracing my witchiness.
Yes. And it's interesting as your dharma comes and as it shapes, right? And I want to, before I get into that, I do want to touch on the anxiety that we see in our kids these days.
Yeah.
And are we as parents, as moms, doing that to our kids?
First of all, no. Yes, but no. Like, moms, the most easiest punching bag in the world, right? And it's like the hardest job. And moms are always doing the best that they can, always doing it usually with very little support and resources and societal pressures up the wazoo. So like so much compassion and sympathy for moms. I think that we're doing our best. This world is hard. I think kids' anxiety, so that framing that we have in my book, what I call false anxiety and true anxiety, that term false anxiety is triggering for a lot of folks, and it's always helpful to clarify. It's not that the sensation of anxiety is any less real. It's that the basis for it is physical imbalance, and that it's something avoidable. We don't have to be having that anxiety. True anxiety, we're not going to fix that. That's something we have to learn to move through, listen to, heed the call. But false anxiety, we can eliminate all of that unnecessary suffering. This is just from physical imbalance. And I think that kids have a lot of both. And the true anxiety that they're feeling, they are canaries in the coal mine. They are here in service of the collective. They are feeling, and they've been born into a world that's more out of balance than anyone who's at the generation where they're having kids. Like, we've been through our own travails, but this is a more intense and more accelerating towards disaster time in the world. And so these kids are feeling that, and they're not wrong for feeling existential anxiety about it. That said, the part that we can control is all of the false anxiety that kids are experiencing. And they're experiencing a lot of false anxiety. And everything from the fact that our food is inflammatory and nutritionally bankrupt and full of this has now become political, but like additives and food coloring and
right.
all these things that we know, there's evidence in the medical literature. We know that things like food coloring and additives create mental health symptoms like inattention and hyperactivity.
And in other countries, they'll label it. This will cause hyperactivity in your kids if you eat it.
And so here we don't.
We don't label that.
We've sold out to the highest bidder, and so we have, I think, the most poisonous health or food system, and so our kids are victims of that, and they are really out of balance as a result of our food. I remember in childhood, I existed exclusively on processed foods and McDonald's and junk food, and my mood and my emotions were all over the place. Yep. And I wouldn't mind going back in time and eating real food. That would have been great. But even if that wasn't an option, even just telling myself, like, it's not that you're bad. It's that, like, you're on a false mood roller coaster. And just to change my sense of my identity from, like, I'm a problem, I'm out of control or unhinged. And it's like, no, you're crashing from food coloring. And so I'm very conscious of that with my own daughter. And these foods happen. It's very hard to avoid it, no matter how precious we are about it.
Especially when they go to the birthday parties and they have that icing. That's like,
it's unavoidable. And so I dream. I have escapist fantasies of living in a world where it doesn't happen. In New York City, it happens. And so even just to give her grace when she is dysregulated from the foods, it's like, you're a good kid having a hard time, to sort of talk in Dr. Becky terms, but to give her grace that this is not you and you're not bad, but you are dysregulated and it's largely chemical. That's the food. Light and screens, not even to mention the impact of social media directly, but even just light and screens is also impacting kids dramatically. And the fact that after sunset, we really should be surrounded by darkness, but instead we're seeing the glow of our blue spectrum light screens, which is modulating our circadian rhythm. It's making us not secrete melatonin, so we're not getting sleepy, we're not adequately sleeping, and it's changing our hormones because melatonin is in the chain with the sex hormones as well. So it's affecting mood in a variety of those ways. And then nobody's breathing through their nose anymore because of generations of processed foods and soft diets, and so we have underdeveloped jaws, and so everyone's mouth breathing, and that's impacting sleep quality and mood. And so there's all these false moods happening in kids today. And some very real existential concerns. But the part we have some control over is, can we help our kids get their bodily needs met? I think we can do a little bit more than we're currently doing with information.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So I want to get into this next segment, really talking about the tools to transform anxiety. So I wanted to explore how you've developed practical and actionable tools from the book that help people not just manage it, but actually transform it into a resource for growth, and kind of almost thinking, can we use anxiety as a superpower? And is there a conventional and unconventional holistic tool from your practice that's helped shape you and your clients to turn anxiety into a signal for healing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we don't even need to turn it into a superpower. I think it's just a reframe in how we understand what is this trait. And I think about humans on a spectrum in many, many ways, but we're sort of on a spectrum in terms of how deeply we viscerally connect to what's wrong in the world around us. And I don't really think that there's a better or a worse. Like, I don't fault someone who doesn't viscerally connect to it, because I think that's not their dharma. That's not their role of who they're here to be. We need some people who are unflappable in that ways. And so if someone is here meant to be a pilot, they're meant to be a surgeon, like, the fact that they are not dropped into their heart and connecting to the suffering in the world around it, I don't fault them for that. I want them to stay sturdy. And so that's great. But it's the folks who are with such a thin veil and so deeply viscerally feel the suffering in the world, that connect to oppression in the world. If they're feeling that and it's almost crippling at times, I do want those folks to understand that that's not something to pathologize. That's not something wrong with them, that's their dharma and their role. It's a part of the collective. And their role really is to feel that. And then a lot of different things can come from feeling that. alchemizing that, letting it drive you to make your art, letting it drive you to certain forms of activism, letting it drive you to, you know, whatever is that circle of where you're lit up and what lights your fire, and it's your curiosity and it's your gift to offer.
So really rechannel that.
Yeah, but to really see that if you are very sensitive, even though our world has said, why are you so sensitive? We don't need to take the bait and say like, well, what's wrong with me? I think that's very much what's right with you. And now how do we help you not suffer as much from it? And how do we help you channel it? Because it, I believe, has something to do with what you're here to do in service of the collective.
So really, yeah, in a way, utilizing it to be in service.
Yeah.
And how does the concept of rebalancing your inner climate work in practice? Like, what does it mean to reset your body's ecosystem, and how is that different from just kind of like treating some of the symptoms?
Yeah. I mean, all of conventional medicine is really primarily symptom suppression. It's basically saying, okay, you have heartburn, let's give you an antacid. What's an antacid doing? It's stopping your stomach from making stomach acid so that no more stomach acid to leak into the esophagus, no more heartburn. And it's like, oh, look at us, we solved the problem. But we did nothing to cure it. We suppressed that symptom. And what we don't do in conventional medicine is ask why. In conventional medicine, it's very like, what do you have? A diagnosis equals a medication. In functional medicine or root cause medicine, it's not really what do you have, it's what's going on. We're always asking why. So why does someone have heartburn? And maybe there's intra-abdominal pressure that's increased. Maybe that's from, you know, SIBO or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. You keep asking why and you keep digging deeper until you've identified the root cause of the problem and addressed it at that level. And then someone doesn't have to have heartburn anymore. There's no need for the antacid. So what does it mean? I think that we are elaborate houseplants in many ways.
Oh, I like that. Okay.
We our bodies just have certain needs for good water and minerals, for a variety of nutrients. It's like a nutritional scavenger hunt. We need all of these different things for our cells to function properly. We need sunshine, we need sleep, we need movement, we need more psychospiritual things like community and purpose and all of that. So I think that we just need to be real about the fact that in the modern life, we are pretty sickly houseplants. Like, we are not getting those basic needs met. Our terrain is not healthy, our soil is not healthy, we're not necessarily getting the sunshine and the fresh air and the water that these houseplants need. And so I really like the whole first half of the book is just very actionable strategies to say, here's how you take good care of your houseplant. And most of it, even though we know it or we've heard it before, we're not doing it because it's hard to do, because our world is not structured to support that. And so kind of using irreverence and humor and workarounds, how I've figured out how to take care of my own houseplant in my life and how someone can realistically do that. And so that's a big part of it. It's not high tech or fancy, but it's critical as a foundation, because if we are not physically well, we cannot be mentally well. And I think that when we are saying, like, if you go to the emergency room with a panic attack and someone's saying it's all in your head, like that sort of gaslighty, dismissive way that conventional medicine has about anxiety, I would say, if anything, it's all in your body. And we really need to get the body in balance. And usually that takes care of some large percentage of someone's anxiety.
So your whole scope has been treating the full body and not just, all right, I'm going to just give them a medication.
Yeah.
And did that, like, was that an actual shift for you in your practice? Because of, obviously, you're a trained psychiatrist, and, like, you know, most psychiatrists are just writing scripts.
Right.
And so when was that, was there like a particular turning point that you're like, I'm not going to practice medicine in this way because I have to treat the root cause. I have to treat the body.
Yeah.
And did you get any backlash from your other colleagues around this?
Yeah. It would make a better story if I was like practicing in a conventional way and then had an aha moment. But that aha moment for me was like week 1 of med school.
No way.
Then I just never managed to step off the track. In retrospect, I don't know. I was not yet connected to my intuition, But it is right, I believe, that I went through that 11-year ordeal so that I can now say with some authority and some understanding of the mechanics of the human body, like, that's not it.
Yeah.
That approach is not it. But I kind of already felt out of alignment with it week 1, and I kept going. And
Oh my
so
goodness.
it was tough. But I think that
Week 1 of medical school. Oh my goodness.
But the backlash, absolutely, and I see the merits of Western medicine. Like, if you are in a car accident, if you had a heart attack, like if you broke a bone, if you need the heroics, thank God we have this system that can absolutely repair a body that's already broken in incredible ways. It's just that 90% of health is not reacting once the shit has already hit the fan. Mm-hmm. It's how do we prevent the shit from hitting the fan in the first place? And how do we live in a way that's in balance on a day-to-day basis and prevent big imbalance later? So that's just more what I'm driven to focus on. It's what I'm here to do. And we've got work to do on that, because we are really unwell, and it's in certain ways getting worse, not better, because our world is less and less meeting our houseplant needs.
Well, and I love the analogy of the houseplant. And, I think also I just came across a few of these like viral memes, on Instagram, as they do. And the whole idea is, you were never meant to hold the weight of the world or know the despairs and the big griefs of the world. And, and that meme has been coming up a lot. And what do you say for those that struggle with mental health, for those that struggle with, or either, anxiety, they're just more prone to feeling the big feels? Do you suggest that they just not watch the news and they unfollow all of these accounts that are sharing the despairs of the world that obviously cannot really be fixed by the people that are, consuming that content?
We have to make it realistic, but I do think it's worth understanding this through an ancestral lens. Like you're saying, it's that we evolved in these communities of maybe about 100, 120 people. And we are wired to be able to grapple with the goings-on of 100, 120 people. Are things going okay? Are things not going okay over here? We can hold that. And currently, we're able to be aware of the goings-on of every human in every corner of the world. And we are not wired to be able to triage that appropriately. Maybe one day we will evolve to be able to triage that. We're not there yet. That said, here we are, and we have these addictive little phones that show this to us in a way that we can't look away from. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth understanding that we're living in the attention economy, which is to say our attention has become the commodity. Mm-hmm. That's what's being competed for. And so these are smart companies. They know their neuroscience and their behavioral psychology. We just need to be honest with ourselves about the fact that the way they are making themselves successful is by preying on our fear response or instilling uncertainty or doubt or controversy. That gets more traction, it gets more eyeballs. We rubberneck and hand over an increasingly large share of our attention. They get more ad revenue, they're the big winners, but our mental health is the collateral damage. Yeah. So we just want to be intentional. I think so much of making better choices is just making sure we take that sacred pause and check in with ourselves about what's the act of radical self-love in this moment. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's having the glass of wine, sometimes it's having the seltzer. Sometimes it's scrolling to decompress, and sometimes it's saying, I don't have the reservoir right now to be shown a carousel of the atrocities of the world. I'm going to put the phone to the side and shift my attention to something life-affirming. I think one of the most impactful ways to do that is just to think about the bookends of the day. Mm. So I'm not going to tell my patients, like, stop scrolling altogether or put your phone on grayscale. Once in a rare while, I have a patient who takes me up on that. Mostly they laugh in my face and it's just not happening. And so the bookends of the day, I think, are the most impactful. Scroll in the middle of the day, but right when you wake up, have that be a time when you're choosing how you want to perceive the day. You're setting the intention for the day, not whatever notification has managed to push to the front of your lock screen. And at the end of the day, that last hour before bed, if you can manage to not be scrolling at that time, because I think that's a time when, first of all, the blue light, but second of all, sleep was such a vulnerable state evolutionarily that we need to feel safe in order to fall asleep. And when we are doom scrolling and feeling surrounded by all of the dangers of the world, it makes it really difficult to secrete melatonin, get sleepy, fall into a good, deep restorative sleep. And we need that. And so we need to get ourselves into more of a virtuous cycle where we're rested. Because really the one good part about how we're driven to doom scroll is that we see what's wrong in the world, it hooks us, and we want to do something about it. We want to do something about it, but we need to be rested and we need to be clear. We can't be every kind of activist. So we need to know what's the thing that's resonant for us. Where do we have a unique ability to make a contribution? All of that requires a little more space from our phones so that we can really dial into where we're going to make our unique impact.
Yeah. So creating the space. And it's almost, I'm hearing, the conscious effort to protect your mental health, to protect your mind, really.
Yeah.
So you can have that creative energy and output and flow for what you're really meant to be doing.
Yeah.
So in a world where we're constantly told to fix our anxiety, how do we instead transform it into a catalyst, into an inner compass that guides us to what truly matters? I mean, this goes into what we were kind of just talking about. And if, for those listening who are just more prone to that, but they get stuck in that loop. And it's something, I wrote a book called That Sucked, Now What? And where...
It's a great title.
Where I feel like a lot of times people, they get stuck in the suck and they get stuck in the rumination and they get stuck in their inner critic. How, is there something that you help your patients, snap out of, or, do you have them kind of sit in that rumination? Does it then get worse for them? How do you have them get out of that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. So in certain ways, to me, there's an algorithm to this.
Okay.
And the first phase of the algorithm, I am trying to fix someone's anxiety. It's like, it's a beautiful idea. We're not broken, don't fix us. It's like, I think all the false anxiety is worth fixing. I think we think of it as heavy duty. We think about it as refractory mental health conditions. And in fact, it's just that our blood sugar is swinging, we're inflamed, our gut is unwell, we're undernourished, and we're chronically sleep deprived. All of that heavy-duty suffering does not need to be happening.
All of those things.
Yeah. And so I just see it everywhere I go. Like, this is the lens through which I view the world. I see people needlessly suffering, and they think of it as a part of their identity. They think of it as how they are feeling viscerally connected to what's not right in the world. But you can be aware of what's not right in the world and be well and still be thriving and have joy in your life and be intact. And I think all the ways that we're not intact, so often it's false anxiety. And so I like to fix that because I think it's unnecessary suffering and it's actually standing in the way of our ability to make our art, to carry out our purpose. And so fix it first. And then once you've really done a reasonable amount of cleaning up the false anxiety, then what remains is our true anxiety. And then what we do with that is it's a little bit of an individual process, but sometimes it's that we need to move the emotions up and out and through. And so sometimes it's really crying more, journaling, talking with a trusted friend or a therapist. I love someone to do like a shamanic shaking ritual.
Oh, yes.
I learned this when I studied integrative medicine at the University of Arizona. And
so much data around that.
There is a lot of data. Yeah. Dance in general, it turns out, is our best psych med. Who knew? We knew.
Who knew?
So, and so basically you want to put on some kind of drum beat that's already going to elicit a theta wave pattern in the brain. And then you close your eyes and you just move however your body feels like moving. If you can do it for 5 minutes, great. If you can do it for 90 seconds, great. And you do what you can. And what I guide patients through this, I guide sometimes corporate wellness workshops through this.
I love it.
And I have people then sit afterward. And what usually happens is you've excavated something that wants to be claimed or wants to be released. So even just shaking for a few minutes and then sitting in meditation, just eyes closed, keeping your focus internal, you can see what bubbled up. And you hold it lightly You just stay curious about it, and maybe it's something that needs to be felt or claimed or released, and you can move through it there. When someone's stuck in a rumination, it's usually that it's hard to come at that directly and say, like, stop that. Like, right, the brain has these deeply trodden grooves, and usually it's that you have to create this other state that's so compelling it pulls somebody out. And that can look a lot of different ways. Community, like spending time with the people that affirm you, that fill your cup, spending time in nature, listening to music, any kind of exercise, any change of set and setting. And I think psychedelics have a role in this.
I was going to ask you, is there a specific psychedelic that you've worked with or that you recommend for anyone that's moving through their anxious
It's
thoughts?
a whole menu of options, and they're sort of differently right for different people at different phases and depending on their circumstances. So that was a lot of like, it depends. But I think that like if I have a patient who wants to do things completely legally and above board, they can either work with ketamine or travel somewhere where something like psilocybin or ayahuasca is legal. And that kind of work is powerful on a number of different levels. But part of it is that it shakes up the snow globe. So if you're stuck in a pattern, to shake everything up and allow the snow to fall in a different way, the neurochemical way of describing that is that you have a window of neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, basically the ability for the brain to change and adapt. And then you can leverage that. You can say, okay, I'm going to do some very targeted trauma-focused therapy during this time, or inner child work or parts work. And you can have a really high mileage therapeutic process in that window, and that's where you can really change some entrenched refractory patterns.
And what about, because isn't it that, with anxiety, everyone's just like living in their head? What about more of the like heart opener types of, psychedelics, like the MDMA? Obviously, there's the assisted MDMA now that is going through the clinical trials. I don't know where it's at, if it's gotten approved in certain states or not, but I know that was kind of in the mix.
Yeah, I mean, MAPS and all the organizations have done incredible work around that. There's been a setback, but I suspect it's a matter of when and not if. So these will become legal, FDA-approved therapeutic modalities. MDMA as a empathogen and a heart opener is, I think, incredibly helpful for trauma and PTSD. I really love it for couples therapy as well. And I love it for anyone who struggles with self-acceptance and self-love. Because usually there really just needs to be an expansion of compassion and understanding for wherever you're stuck. And that can be forgiving someone in your life. It can be loving yourself. And I think it does help drop us into our bodies. And that is, you're exactly right. It's like so much of our anxiety is that the energy is too high up. It's spinning in our cerebral areas of our, if you think about where is the energy hanging out in your body, and we want to drop it lower, whether that's through yoga practices and breath work or grounding and spending time in nature, or through psychedelic work, or through dance, and all of this that can help bring us back into our bodies.
Dances are like natural MDMA.
Yes, yes, and psilocybin, and so it's all of it.
All of it.
At once.
All of it.
And that's another beautiful thing about psychedelics is that it's purgative. And so, like, I sometimes think about how we talked about crying and how that moves
purging
emotions up and out. And when I put someone on a psych med, like a Lexapro, an antidepressant, often what I'll hear them report is like, it's like, how are you feeling? Is it working? Is it helpful? It's like a shrug, kind of like, I'm not sure, but I've noticed that I'm crying less. And we usually think of this as a sign of health, of a sign of progress. We're kind of tamping down emotions. Whereas medicines like psilocybin, ayahuasca, that's actually usually eliciting a pretty big emotional purge.
Oh, yeah.
Crying in a big way, and other forms of purging, shaking and moaning and sounding and other charming kinds of purging.
Yeah.
And so I think that I suspect that what that's doing is bringing whatever that emotion that's stuck inside us to a place of resolution. And I always think about sort of Lexapro and psilocybin on this dialectic. There's a tension.
Opposite.
Yeah, and one is going to tamp down the tears and one is going to bring them forth in a pretty dramatic way.
But at least it's up and out,
At least it's up and out. So they're different paths, and up and out isn't right for all people in all circumstances, but I think it's something to keep in mind as perhaps the more definitive way of arriving at resolution.
Wow, I love that you have the traditional medical background and you're kind of bringing all of this info into a way where it's just so palpable, but also just kind of, that we can also talk about psychedelics as a form of therapy, because I feel like not very many doctors I can bring on that could actually talk about to both. So I feel like your integrative approach and your lived experience and how open you are and how your heart is. And I feel like when we started the conversation, you were all about, your mission is to reduce human suffering. And I love that, because you are in such a gentle way where there is the soft power there as well. I want to get into or spill the chai round, but I also want to, is there anything else that you want to share around the next book that's coming out? Anything else that we missed?
Sure, yeah. So my first book, The Anatomy of Anxiety, is this functional medicine approach to anxiety. And that has been that's a straightforward journey for me. It's like my life's work in one book and helps people get relief. The book I'm writing right now, called Season of the Witch, is completely different. And this is where...
So exciting.
It's been a much more dredging writing process where I didn't really set out knowing where I was going to land. I was groping in the dark a bit, but I knew that there was something to be communicated here around what I went through with grief, and how that forced open in me a question of what is really happening here with existence? And of the people that I've lost, have I lost them absolutely? And is that the end? Or is there something beyond our comprehension? And is there comfort to be found through that openness to the mystery? And so that's been the exploration, and it's really helped me realize that our world tamps down some of those mystical, intuitive, right hemispheric, kind of feminine yin beliefs, and that we're suffering as a result. And so I really had to reclaim it and realize that if I am connecting to woo-woo things, that's not less than being able to do math in my head.
Right.
And I had shame around it, and now I kind of have reclamation around it. Now I even have rebellious, feels like I'm interested in forming an army of people, giving other people permission to reclaim this. And so I just want people to not disavow any parts of themselves, even if our world tells us it's less than a rational, intelligent way of being. I think those yin, witchy, magical, intuitive, mystical ways of seeing the world are equally valid. We've been out of balance, and we need to bring them back into the conversation.
It's so true, and that kind of speaks to also, the feminine in so many ways, and that's kind of what you're also bringing back from the very masculine part of practice that you were in for so long. And I'm so excited for this next book. My last question before we get into the spill the chai round is, what do you think your mom would say now that she was the alchemist to bring you to this next chapter for yourself?
My mom, librarian, humble, quiet, I don't think she would want to even say anything on a podcast. She'd be like, I think that she's proud of me, and I think she sees me as it's not necessarily what she would do, but she sees me in my full expression, and I think she's cheering me on.
Yeah. Love this conversation. Where can we get more of you, Ellen, and as we can kind of follow the journey to your next book? And obviously everyone should get the Anatomy of Anxiety. It's been around for at least a couple of years now.
It's been around since 2022, but it just came out on paperback, so that's exciting. So it's more affordable and easier to fit into your bag and less heavy to carry around.
Yes.
So I love a paperback.
Yes. We'll link it in the show notes too.
And then, but I'm on Instagram. I'm at Vora MD.
Oh, amazing. Okay, here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
Is there one food or drink that secretly wrecks our mental health more than we think?
Alcohol.
Oh, well, yeah, that's true. Rise of the non-alc space.
Yeah. Sober curious.
Sober curious. Yeah, here we go. True or false? Anxiety is always something we should get rid of.
False.
What's a recent body whisper you actually listened to?
I was just on a road trip in California, and it was a constant communication with body whispers because there were a lot of decisions. It often felt like things were at stake. And so it was an ongoing dialogue. But there was one day my daughter was in no mood. Like it was a real struggle. And so I dropped into my more witchy maternal knowing, and I was like, oh, she's just constipated. And then I realized, like, that's why everything was hard, and that's why nothing was going well. And then we kind of created the conditions for her to have a big bowel movement, and then everything turned up. So
there we go.
Yeah. So sometimes you just need to, like, moms have a preternatural understanding of their children's needs and bodies and what's off. And so I had to pause and slow down and tap in, and then I knew exactly what we had to do, and it really turned the day around.
So amazing. What's your go-to self-soothing move when anxiety hits?
It's dance, music, and crying.
Yeah.
And talking.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. What is one word that describes this season of life?
I feel full.
Yeah. Ellen, Vora, such a insightful conversation. I've loved and wanted you on the show for so long. So I'm so glad that we actually made this happen. And I can't wait for everybody to get your book. So thank you for being here on the Brave Table. We're going to bring you back for part 2 for the witchy conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to my mother-in-law for connecting us. What a gift. Thank you so much. This is an honor.
Amazing. Okay. Wow. What a soul-stirring conversation. So please share this with anybody in your life that has anxiety. I hope this sparked a little bit more perspective, perhaps maybe a different way of dealing with your anxiety, going deeper, kind of pulling back, the layers of what it actually could be. If you're watching this on YouTube, what are you waiting for? Please go ahead and like this episode and subscribe because you don't want to miss a beat. It helps us grow the show more than you know. Thank you so much for being here. And with all that, I will see you next time on the Brave Table.
You know I've got so much more in store for you. So if you are really ready to dive in and keep owning your emotions like the boss that you are, click right here. Go ahead, don't be shy. I'll see you in the next one. Keep shining.